Hi and welcome to the Wayne Lemos podcast. I'm your host Wayne Lemos and we'll be continuing with our mini-series Let's Make Psychology Living Culture. We are on episode 2 explaining the different types of anxiety disorders for the common man. Well, according to the DSM-5, that is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, currently in use, we have 3 main classifications, which are anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, and trauma and stressor related disorders. Here it's important to note that with the DSM-5 there were a lot of critics actually that were complaining that regular people would also be classified as having mental disorders, and with the DSM-5 also everything got rearranged, and some psychologists even joked that it was a witness protection program where they got newly classified and were given new names. Elaborating on these main groups, so under anxiety disorders you have separation anxiety disorder, which is commonly seen in children when a child is fearful of being separated from their caregiver. Then you have selective mutism, in which a person is unable to speak in certain social situations, and it can be seen as silence, like a silent child. It can be mistaken for that by a couple of people who wouldn't be aware of that. Then you have social phobia, where everyday interactions can make a person self-conscious and anxious. Then you have panic disorder, where it could be a result of a traumatic event. Some of the symptoms are shaking and trembling, shortness of breath, sweating, amongst others. Then you got agoraphobia, which is the fear of crowded places, where a person is scared and longing for an escape. And then you have general anxiety. Moving on, under the second section, you have obsessive compulsive disorders. Under that, you first have OCD itself, and OCD is unwanted and intrusive thoughts and urges and fears that compel a person into certain repetitive behaviors. So there could be your thoughts are compelling you to touch this thing or keep something inside, otherwise it might get stolen. Next we have body dysmorphic disorder, where a person obsesses over a certain body part as a flaw and may perceive oneself as ugly because of that. There could be anything from a mole to back fat. Anyway, moving on, we move on to hoarding disorder, where a person finds security in items and gets a strong attachment to them, a very strong emotional attachment, and can even experience distress if somebody else tries to take those items away from them. Moving on after hoarding disorder, and this is where you will see why critics were complaining, is trichotillomania. That's a trichotillomania, which is an urge to pluck or pull one's hair, which is also classified as a disorder. And then you have excoriation, which is the picking at one's skin, which can lead to sores. And now under the third section, which is trauma and stressor related disorders, you have reactive attachment disorder, which is kind of the opposite of separation anxiety disorder, where a child in this case has negative emotions towards a caregiver, which is usually due to neglect. I'm going to be moving on a little fast over here. Then you have disinhibited social engagement disorder, PTSD, acute stress disorder, and adjustment disorder. Here we see that OCD and PTSD were put into separate categories, and if you were from 20 years before and you had studied psychology as I had studied it in college, it's way different today. We will be looking a lot more in depth into OCD and PTSD, and even complex PTSD known as CPTSD. It's widely known in circles today, but it's not yet included in the DSM-5. It will be in the DSM-6 from what I've checked into. We will also be looking into hoarding and other disorders also in future episodes, so don't worry about that. And well, that's it for now. We are out of time, and thank you for listening. This is the Wayne Lemos podcast, recorded for community, recorded for you, and this is Wayne Lemos, your host, signing off. Thank you and goodbye.